Good morning, friends. Matt Greer here from the sanctuary in St. John's United Methodist Church in Albuquerque. Nice to see you this morning. Hope that you are enjoying the beautiful weather if you're in Albuquerque, and if you're not in Albuquerque, I hope you're enjoying whatever kind of weather you have. I'm so pleased to be back with you this morning. We took a week off last week after Easter, which was very intense. I mean, kind of intense in a different way than it is when we get to do stuff live. We did a bunch of pre-recording of music, as a lot of you may have seen, for Easter Sunday in particular, and then had instrumentalists in the room with us for Maundy, Thursday, and Good Friday. And if you haven't gotten to see that, all of that is, of course, available on our YouTube channel. And actually, the Easter music that we recorded included two fantastic trumpeters and our guest this morning, Alexis Corbin, playing timpani. So if you haven't seen that music, it is worth seeing. As I mentioned, I'm sitting here in the sanctuary, and this is going to be a very intense week because, as many of you are aware, we are opening the sanctuary next Sunday, April 18th, for limited worship in here. I think the cap is, I shouldn't say because I don't know, but I think the cap is 75 people. To begin. And so if you are itching to get back in the room for live worship, man, we are excited about the possibility of seeing you. And there'll be a link for pre-registration. We're asking people to pre-register, both so that we can keep an eye on the numbers if we need to, and also for contact tracing, of course, if that should become necessary. So that will be in the email newsletter tomorrow or on the website if you would like to register to come to the 11 o'clock service next Sunday. So the big challenge right now is we have basically this part of the room anyway has looked like a TV studio for the last year, with wires everywhere and cameras. And so the challenge of the week, and we had a bit of a dry run at this yesterday in the live stream worship service, is to figure out how to continue to do the live stream, because that's going to continue and it's going to continue to be important. And to think about having people in the pews again, amplifying speech so that they can hear what's going on, using the screens as necessary. It is not going to feel exactly the same. Congregational singing still is not advisable. And I think that's going to feel very strange, honestly. But we're going to have terrific music up here on the chancel. And just being in the room together, I think, will be absolutely wonderful. So think about joining us next Sunday morning for live stream worship. Pre-register. There'll be a link available. So we're here to talk about music, and I'm going to start this morning by just playing a video recording of one of my very favorite pianists in the world. This was recorded about a year ago for our Music from St. John's project. This is Amy Greer playing an intermezzo by 20th century American composer Manuel Ponce. Enjoy. Hope you enjoyed that. Hearing that reminds me a lot of actually being at home in my living room, hearing someone practice the piano all day long. I'm going to play a couple of videos from that series that we did right around lockdown last year in an effort to get music videos made and give musicians work. And it strikes me listening to that even as beautiful as it sounds, and the photography that Shea Perry did is just gorgeous. We have come such a long way in figuring out how to amplify sound in the room for live stream, thanks to Jim Aaron, who is in our staff. And listening to some of the early videos and then the ones that happened a little bit later as we figured out how to place microphones under Jim's supervision, it's just gotten better and better. And that's one of the challenges of going to live worship, honestly, because we feel like we've gotten in a groove of how to do this live streamed pretty well. And now we have to figure out how to make it a good experience for the people in the room and keep the cameras out of the way and all of that. I'm going to play one other video before I introduce our guest. And this is kind of by way of introduction for our guest this morning. This was another video that was made last April, I believe, for the Music from St. John's project. This is Alexis Corbin and Hovey Corbin, who are soul calypso when they are performing this music together, performing How High the Moon. Enjoy. Muted. Sorry. So what did I just say? I said that was Alexis Corbin on steel drums and Hovey Corbin on marimba playing How High the Moon, and I just love that video. And so that leads me in to introduce my friend and special guest, Alexis Corbin. Alexis is no stranger to St. John's. We have her here to play as often as possible. Her 3 fantastic children went through our youth choir here at various times. And as I mentioned before, she was here as recently as a couple of weeks ago to play timpani for Easter for us. So welcome, Alexis Corbin. Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning.
How are you?
I am well. Yeah.
And you're coming from your home in Nob Hill?
Yes, from my home. From my home and workspace for the past year. Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of amazing because one of the things I meant to mention this is that you're an on-air host at KHFM, Classical 95.5 KHFM. And if I'm not mistaken, you're the morning person, right?
I sure am. Yeah.
So you're on KHFM and on with us this morning. That's amazing.
I am currently, in 2 places at once. It's a magical trick.
Well, thank you for making time to do this in between being on KHFM this morning. What's it been? I'm going to ask you questions as if we haven't had a single conversation in the last year. And of course, that's not true. But like a lot of people, but I think especially for you and Hovey, we're used to having your weekends and much of the rest of the week jam-packed with gigs and performing opportunities, and that's kind of shut down. So what has the last year been like for you in that regard?
Yeah, that's true. I feel like every performer has mourned that to some degree. For us, I feel like we were fortunate in a lot of ways to still have work that existed past performing work, and to be able to, in some ways, really embrace a lot of family time. And also, I feel like it wasn't that long into the pandemic that we realized we also lived in a house with other musicians and we could still play together. So we didn't have a complete lack of performing opportunity over the past year, which was lucky for us too.
Right. Yeah, we featured the entire family on a couple of live streams over the past year, and that was very, very fun.
Fun for us too, yeah.
I wonder if it felt like for the children that they were being, it was kind of forced labor, that they were being forced to do something that they had no choice in.
I feel like there are definitely times like that. And the only thing that was a little different this time around, and we just had more space in, time and headspace or whatever, was that we were able to really just go, let's everybody pick something they want. And, it wasn't just Hovey and I saying, here are songs we know, and now you will learn them. And that made it a little more fun.
Yeah. Well, very cool. So I wanted to talk to you kind of about percussion because I have enjoyed being friends with you and Hovey both, just because you're fantastic people, but also because I've always just loved percussion. I have no background in percussion. I have no background in band or orchestra, actually, at all. But I've always really been drawn to percussion. So how is it that you got drawn to percussion? How did that happen for you, high school, college, and how did that end up you becoming a professional musician?
I have a different memory of that or different story of it than my parents do. So it's funny how theirs is probably more correct. They tell me that I wanted to play drums when I was really small. What I remember is that my cousin had a drum set that he wasn't playing anymore, and my uncle said she can have it if she wants it, and I thought that seemed great. I don't really remember wanting it before a drum set appeared in our lives. And then interestingly enough, my dad was not interested in having a drum set in the house. So that got put in storage right away. I didn't actually play drum set until college, but I was 8 years old when I started playing, when I started taking lessons and then playing in the school band. And I don't remember, I think sometime around high school, I just realized I didn't know what I wanted to do as a career, but I didn't want to stop playing and being involved in some way. It just didn't seem like something I could consider. And I had that teacher that I think a lot of us have that said, if you can imagine something else, you should do that thing.
That's the line we all get, right?
Yeah, and I couldn't really. So I got my degree in music therapy, thinking that would be the backup plan. But yeah.
That's so interesting because I remember for myself thinking that could be a backup plan. And I mean, I didn't necessarily feel, I didn't feel like I had necessarily any calling to that. I remember thinking, oh, this is a career option that people seem to get jobs in. And I could tell my dad that, that's how it was for me. I didn't do that. But, like music education, I think is unfortunately a lot of times for people who want to major in performance, they feel it's a fallback.
Yeah.
So this was in Arizona?
It was Arizona State.
And did you have a fantastic music experience in high school as well?
I did. I think my experiences in high school, I had a great private teacher off and on. We didn't have like a lot of money when I was growing up, but somehow my mom managed to keep these lessons coming, and with gaps in the in the flow of it, and yeah, it was I think probably one of those lifelines. It was just who I was, and I think that's what happens to a lot of kids that start young. It just becomes who you are, and you don't know any other way to be who you are without it.
Right. I told you I was going to ask you about preconceptions that people have about percussionists. But it strikes me that maybe one of them is that percussionists. This is not me talking, right? This is a preconception that may or may not be out there.
Sure.
That percussionists are not real musicians because people misbelieve that percussionists don't read pitched notation. You know what I'm getting at?
Oh, that's a good preconception.
That there is, and of course, there's pitched percussion and unpitched percussion. And you and hubby, for instance, playing marimba, steel drum, and you could name any number of examples of why you need to be able to read notes as well as any other musician. But is that something that people often think?
Yeah, that's funny. I'd forgotten that. I blocked it out. I do remember being in a concert once. I was watching hubby perform, and it was a performance of Britain's Noah's Flood. So he was kind of leading an ensemble of kids, because that's one that involves a lot of youth performers. And so I was sitting directly in front of someone whose child was up there playing, and I just remember her saying something to her friend next to her. She said, well, so-and-so, she wants to play percussion next year. And I told her she needs to play a real instrument like the clarinet, but I mean, so yeah, so it definitely that happens. But yeah, we do well. So a lot of people ask me that too when we play steel drums, whether we're actually able to play chromatically and whether we are reading music or whatever. And that's a funny one because it comes out of a rote tradition, and so you wouldn't have to know how to read music. And I've played in bands that have done both, but it helps so much to be able to put a piece of music in front of you and have that guide too. So yeah, but obviously if you want to play in an orchestra or in an opera or something.
Right. And so was there a progression for you, or is there a progression for a lot of percussionists about specializing in one particular area and then picking up and gaining skills in other instruments as you go along?
Yeah, I think for sure. And that would be maybe another preconceived notion that I think we're getting away from, that it used to be that if you were a girl and you started on percussion, you were probably playing the bells, and the boys would play, the drums. And I think we've gotten away from that. I also used to hear a lot of women say, I'd have women come up to me after concerts and say, I wanted to play and I wasn't allowed to. That's going away as well. But yeah, I feel fortunate because I think I got a really broad education. I think, and different schools are different, but I think the focus was making us marketable musicians in a variety of styles. And so when I was in college, and so everybody really kind of did everything. It's not always like that. And I do remember I was young. I think I was a freshman in some master class. Someone was visiting and asked, how many of you are timpani specialists? And one guy raised his hand, and I remember us all going, you are? Like, oh, I didn't know that about you. But yeah, I think you find the thing that sort of kind of works with you. I don't know.
And timpani is its own thing in an orchestral setting, right? It is often the case that there is a timpanist who is not in the section of the other percussion. Yeah, right.
Absolutely.
And a lot of people, I think, don't realize that. It's a very specialized thing, right?
It is very much so, yeah. I mean, people call the timpanist the second conductor. There's a lot going on where their hits are with this section and this part, of setting the tempo for that section. Just I don't know. Yeah, timpani is cool. I'm not that great at it. That's not my specialty.
I just hired you to play timpani. I paid you money to play timpani like 3 weeks ago. Why didn't you tell me you're not any good?
I'm a marketable timpanist. I apologize. I changed my answer.
Which, by the way, there are 3 timpanis sitting over there. If you you would like to, take them, it's
actually
fine.
Forgot, yeah.
I'll put them on eBay if they're not this week. It also strikes me that the techniques such as we saw Hovey using, playing marimba with multiple mallets, that's got to be something very specialized in that family of instruments, right? That you worked a long time on.
That's a rare thing. I don't do that, actually. That's a really interesting grip. So it's really common, especially when you get to the college level, to play 4 mallets and you do 2 in each hand. That's a really common technique that you have to learn to play marimba literature. But I guess there's a pretty strong tradition in the Guatemalan marimba tradition, and the marimba is the national instrument of Guatemala, where basically you can have like 4 or 5 people standing on against, up at one marimba. And, there's a couple people playing melody and harmony lines. There's people playing chords. There's somebody playing a bass line. And I guess it must have developed there that basically what Hovey does is one hand is the bass line and one hand is the chords. And they're totally independent, ideally. And really, that's not done that much. I remember a few pieces along the way, and there might be more now if I was up on the most current marimba literature, where people would do 3 in each hand, and it felt like a party trick and not, like the real standard thing. But yeah, Hovey does that a lot, and I don't know a lot of people that do.
Interesting. I know you all have a studio in your house that is just jam-packed with fun equipment. What are some of the more unusual instruments you have been called upon to play?
Well, one of the ones that people always laugh at, because it kind of gets a little bit of awareness here and there, or is playing brake drum, which is literally the brake drum of a car. And in steel drum bands, like we were playing steel drum in that clip. In steel drum bands in Trinidad, it's a legit important key instrument in the rhythm section, which is called the engine room in a steel drum band. And somebody plays, steel drum bands can get really, really loud, and it's a pretty loud instrument, especially when you're hitting it with potentially with metal beaters and keeping the time for everybody.
Is it pitch?
Not really, no. Although there are a lot of we'll see some of this later, but there's a lot of pieces that kind of call for brake drums in different pitches, but maybe not like an A or a whatever.
So I just wondered if like the brake drums from a Volvo, had a different brake drums from a Cadillac or something.
So you laugh, but yeah, they really do. Yeah.
Speaking of steel drums, you took a trip a couple of years ago, didn't you, that was related to steel drums, since that's become a passion and specialty of yours? Where was that to?
I did, and I went to Trinidad and Tobago. I felt very fortunate to get to make that trip with a friend of mine that I went to Arizona State with. Actually, she was leading a group of her own students, and she just said, "Hey, there's room on this trip," and said, "Yes, I am going with you." So we got to study from steel drum is so interesting. It's such a new instrument that there are still people alive now who will tell you that they were there or they were involved with the instrument being created. Lots of people, who say it was my idea. And so it was really cool to take classes while we were there with people who were there as the instrument was being developed. And it really came out of this, it had a really negative association when the steel drum started, that it was thought to be an instrument of gang members. And there were a lot of clashes with rival gangs, and people would sharpen the edges of their steel drum so they could cut each other and run. And so it's really evolved in an interesting way into this thing where there are regularly there'll be really large bands, 100 people in them, playing transcriptions of classical music or pieces from the radio or whatever, really intricate arrangements of tunes. So.
And now steel drum bands have become more common, right? For instance, Hovey teaches a steel drum band at the Albuquerque Academy. Is that true?
He does. Yeah, he has a really excited core group of students that play. It had started out being sort of an every now and then thing. Well, it was a special summer offering, and then it was something that during the school year he would every now and then pull out. And now it's he has some really dedicated kids that. Well, when life is normal again, we'll practice in the mornings before school. And yeah.
I think everybody loves steel drums. I think are there people who don't like steel drums? My impression is one of those
there
things.
are. I've had people admit to me, actually, probably one of the nicest compliments that I've gotten is people who've come up after a concert and said, I thought I hated steel drums, but then I heard you guys play that song or whatever. And now I like them. And so that's nice.
It's just such a happy, soothing sound.
Yeah, it's hard to play sad music on it.
Yeah. So I am going to invite anybody who's watching who has any questions at all for Alexis to put them in the chat, and if we have time, we will include them. I see Danielle Garcia is joining us from Chicago. Nice to see you, Danielle. Very cool that you're here.
Hi, Danielle.
So I usually, when I have a guest on this little thing, invite them to share a piece of music that they love. And I did that with Alexis. And so we're going to play a clip that Alexis selected. Tell us about this piece.
Yeah, so I had a hard time. It's funny. I told you, that'll be so easy to choose something I love. And then I realized I kind of broadly love many things. Maybe I'm not very discerning, but a lot of things are fun to listen to. But I picked this in a way that I wanted to share something that maybe not everyone has gotten a chance to hear because it's not performed all that much. But this is a piece called the Concerto for Violin and Percussion Orchestra by Lou Harrison, a 20th century American composer that I like a lot. I think a lot of percussionists do. And one of the things that I have gotten to perform this piece before, and I really, really enjoyed it for a lot of reasons. It has a lot of the elements that I really enjoy in percussion ensemble. And well, I could tell you a little bit about Harrison and like kind of where this is coming from. So he was a pianist and a dancer and also a dance accompanist. And I think that informed the dance-like nature of like a lot of what he writes. He was a student of Henry Cowell and also a really good friend of John Cage. They were students of Cowell's at the same time. So a lot of the elements that people are aware of with Cage, where Cage and Lou Harrison both were really interested in breaking out of the sort of traditional mindsets of how we make music and what instruments, what is an instrument and how we make music on it. And so the piece that we'll hear has violin, obviously a traditional, normal instrument, but accompanied by 5 percussionists. And for the most part, the percussionists are playing that you wouldn't normally think about as instruments. Suspended pipes, like metal pipes, flower pots, and clock coils. And there's a double bass, but it's played more like a percussion instrument, which I think you'll be able to see in the clip. And a series of differently pitched brake drums, actually, which cool. since we were talking about that. And so I think the cool thing about that to me is that he called it built-in abstraction. So from the very beginning of creating the setup of sounds that you're going to use, you're out of the normal mindset of, here's my cymbal and here's my snare drum or whatever. And to me, because you have to spend so much time before you even start playing, going out and finding, this pipe sounds really good. Or and now this pipe sounds good too, but they're too close in pitch. I need a different one. It's almost like you get to collaborate with the composer in some way, and really, I really enjoy that. Not everyone loves that part of digging around and finding the right flower pot, but I enjoy that. And yeah, so if you're ever at Lowe's or something, and someone's kind of like tapping all the flower pots, you have probably found a percussionist in the wild. Yeah. So I think we're gonna listen to the first movement of Harrison's violin concerto with percussion orchestra. That is what it is.
Lovely. All right, here it is. That is a crazy cool piece.
It really is. So fun. And I forgot to mention, but a big thing that Lou Harrison's always associated with is his love of Indonesian gamelan, and you can really hear that in the percussion writing in that piece. He loved music of all cultures. People write about him. I've read more than one biography that says he had a childlike wonder for the music of all other cultures. So,
yeah. It also strikes me. I mean, one of the reasons that I love percussion, it just seems like the possible colors are endless. Right. I'm sure every other section would say that, but I don't think yet.
Yeah, it's a big palette for sure.
Yeah, it's a huge palette. So we have a couple of interesting questions. Susan Perry asks, please tell us more about the instruments in your studio.
Well, so interestingly enough, I do have a lot of brake drums. But so my husband, hubby, has collected vintage drums from before we met even. And so I think right now there are probably 7 drum sets in the studio. Um, as well as, let me just sort of mentally take a look around. A kind of an interesting instrument called a xylorimba, which is supposed to be a xylophone at the top and a marimba at the bottom. We have a vibraphone in there. There's just all kinds of sound effects. I feel like one of the things I love is sound effects. Hubby has a very cool drum set that he managed to find at an estate sale from the 1930s, which is a pretty cool prized possession because it comes from the era of drummers doing sound effects and things with silent movie orchestras. And so It actually, it came with, it's such a showpiece. It has a painted bass drum head of these 2 people kissing and a light in the bass drum that you can turn it on. And it has all of these, like a train whistle and all these different sound effects that came with it. So that's some of the stuff in our studio.
Javi says, yep, about 7 drum sets. So
there you go.
Yeah. And then Jonathan Van Arsdale asks an interesting question. With virtually all cars now using disc brakes instead of drum brakes, will musical instrumentation need to be rewritten in the near future?
That's a great question. Actually, you know what's funny about that is that even from the time that Harrison wrote that piece to the brake drums that exist now, brake drums changed. And I kind of have a funny story about that. So when Javi and I were playing the Harrison concerto, we had read that he specifically had been using Model T brakes, brake drums, and I get into these little rabbit holes, and I found out they're way more resonant than brake drums that we have now. And so at first we thought, well, I mean, nobody would have faulted us for just, okay, we'll just find some brake drums, it's fine. And then the more I thought about it, I thought, well, maybe I should find pieces of metal that are more resonant, like a brake drum, but more resonant. And then further down the rabbit hole, I found a guy who lives at the foothills, who fixes up Model Ts. so we called him up and we said, yeah, do you have any brake drums for sale? Can we come check those out? And so we went up and we're looking at these brake drums, kind of tapping on them. And he says, okay, so tell me about the car you're working on. And we were like, oh, no. I'm going to play these in a concert. And it's actually one of my music memories because at first he thought he was being, goofed on but once he realized we were serious and we were legitimately really trying to find the most beautiful resonant brake drums in his garage, he went nuts. He was pulling everything down. Try this one. This one's great. What about this? And he's pulling out different car parts. This is a really nice piece of metal, and we ended up with a set of, I think, 5 Model T brake drums that are really resonant and pretty. So yes, I think eventually maybe there'd be sort of a market for vintage brake drums or something. Although right now in the landfill, I'm sure there's plenty to sustain us for a while.
I'm sure there are. That's hilarious. So, like a lot of musicians, Alexis, you have a very checkered past. You have been a teacher. You have been an orchestral musician. You played in bands. You've been a personnel manager for an orchestra. You've homeschooled 3 children, by the way. Yeah. And now one of the main gigs you have is on the air at KHFM in the mornings, as a lot of us are aware and enjoy. How did that happen to you?
That's a fun question. At first, several years back, a position opened up, and I think it was really just on a whim that I thought, oh, that sounds fun. And that's the guiding principle of my life. Let's try that. And so I did. I auditioned for KHFM and realized there was way more to it than it's not just talking into a microphone. I remember looking at the board and going, that's a lot of knobs and sliders, and I don't know how to use those things. And so I didn't get the position at that point, and I was kind of fine with that because I thought, well, I don't really actually know how to do that. And then the position came open again a couple of years later, and I was asked if I wanted to be considered again. And so at that point, I applied again with a little more awareness of what I was getting into, but it has been the most fun job. I'm really glad I had it, especially when the pandemic, brought the whole world crumbling down. I still was on the radio. So thank you, KHFM.
And from
But
home, right? Is that where
and
you are now?
from home, yeah, I have officially been home, broadcasting from home far longer than I was broadcasting in the studio. So it'll be interesting
Wow.
to get back.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very cool. It's very cool to be able to hear your voice and hear you in that role. So I brought a piece to play, and I chose this piece because I love it, and also it's a piece of music that you and I got to do together in 2015, I think.
Oh, it's been
I,
that long. Okay.
I think so. Um, I had this idea with Quintessence, the chorus I direct, to do a concert of music all for chorus and percussion. And I asked Alexis if she would kind of program it with me and create it with me. And it was very fun. And there were a couple of pieces that I had in mind that I absolutely knew of and wanted to do, such as the piece that I'm about to play. But then, as it often happens, programming concerts, you're like, oh, I have to come up with a whole bunch of other stuff. So Alexis and I consulted about this and sent pieces back and forth. And I wrote to a lot of composers saying, do you have anything for, and never do that, because composers are like, they're like puppy dogs. They're still sending me stuff 6 years later saying, wouldn't you like to do this? But anyway, the piece that got me excited about the idea of doing this is a piece by a British composer, Tarek O'Regan, who writes a lot of fantastic, interesting choral music. And he wrote a 3-movement piece called Triptych in 2011, I believe. And it was originally scored for mixed chorus and string orchestra. And it's a piece I had in my ear for a while and thought, oh, I love that. I would love to do that sometime. And then just kind of poking around on the internet one day, I saw that it had been arranged for chorus and percussion orchestra. And I just thought it was amazing. And so this is the piece that made me want to do this concert, and that Alexis collected an amazing group of percussionists and we got this together. And so I'm going to play the 3rd movement of the piece. And actually, the piece is called Triptych, and it's a mishmash of texts, some entire verses of poems, some single lines that are all kind of stacked up on top of each other from various sources, but they all have to do with moving on from this life into the next life. So I'm going to play the 3rd movement for you, and just because there are no titles or whatever, it's all in English. I'm going to play the 3rd movement of the piece, which I think is 7 or 8 minutes long. And even in these 7 or 8 minutes, the texts come from a variety of sources. First, you'll hear 2 lines from Hindu scripture. Each shall arise in the place where their life departs. And why then should I be afraid? I shall die once again to rise an angel blessed. You hear that particular line over and over. And then 4 lines from Wordsworth. Our birth is but a sleep and a forgetting. The soul that rises with us, our life's star, hath had elsewhere its setting and cometh from afar. And then finally 2 lines from Thomas Hardy, the poem he wrote on the signing of the armistice that ended World War I. Calm fell, from heaven distilled a clemency. There was peace on earth and silence in the sky. So those are the texts you're going to hear. This is the a cappella chorus from the University of North Texas with the percussion ensemble from the University of North Texas, conducted by Jerry McCoy. And this is the 3rd movement of Tarek O'Regan's Triptych. That makes me so happy.
That was a really fun concert. Yeah.
And also sad because I miss choirs.
That's too many people to get together right now. Yeah.
It is too many people to get together right now. But someday again. Yeah, that was a very, very fun concert. And I mean, something that I always think about in putting on concerts is, particularly with choirs, that my brain is always divided between having to do what I need to do musically and then worrying about all the logistics of having a lot of people involved. And you are the one that had to worry about all the logistics for all of those instruments, for all of those various pieces that we did and all of the players. And I was really I was really grateful to have you involved in that. So,
but it's worth it. So that's the funny thing. We all, I think percussionists always complain, we complain because we're moving more equipment than other people or whatever. But anytime someone says to you, "Oh, don't you wish you played the flute?" then, it's the first moment that we have that clarity that we're happy to be doing what we're doing. Nothing against the flute, Danielle.
Right. Everybody loves the flute.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this was really fun, Alexis, to be able to chat with you. And especially thanks for introducing me to that Lou Harrison piece. I listened to the whole thing yesterday and I just think it's crazy cool. So
it's really pretty. Yeah. Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. And we will have you back to St. John's to play timpani as soon as we possibly can.
Oh, good. Well, good thing they're there already. Then.
Yeah, that's right. Thanks, Alexis. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay.
Thanks, friends. That was so very fun. And if you're interested in exploring those pieces that we played, they're in the chat. I will be back here next Monday morning, and a conversation I'm really looking forward to with my boss, Reverend Dr. Pam Rowley, who, in addition to being a pastor, has in her checkered past the fact that she was a church music director and elementary school music teacher. And so I'm going to enjoy talking to her about all of that. A reminder to pre-register if you want to come worship with us live next Sunday in the sanctuary. We would love to see you, and have a wonderful Monday. Thanks for watching.